really need to get together and let our voices be heard.
This is Buffalo What's Next. I'm Jay Moran.
I'm Bridget Jaipal Valenza.
I'm Dave Debo.
And I'm Thomas O'Neill White.
After May 14th, how can we afford not to talk about race?
About education, about segregation, about humanity.
Since the dawn of this nation, racial violence has existed.
The way we have designed our society has a big hand in what occurred in that Tops Market.
The suburban area, everywhere. We must work and teach our children.
We need to make sure that we put more funding in our programs that help prevent gun violence and more money into art.
If we're going to have some real healing, we've got to have space to tell some uncomfortable truths.
Good morning, I'm Thomas O'Neill White, and today on Buffalo What's Next, we're talking community, trauma, racism, and healing with former mayoral candidate and community leader Le'Candice Durham. Le'Candice, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
When I ask you, what does Buffalo need, what's the first thing that comes to mind?
Resources, home ownership, financial literacy. Unfortunately, we really can't get to the home ownership without the financial literacy. I think that's the biggest piece on getting out of poverty, making sure that the resources, the education is available. So once residents get into the home ownership or even owning their own business, they can stay there. You know, they don't have to worry about going into foreclosure, generational wealth.
How do we get to that point? What are some like starting points you wanna see to get that financial literacy so there are more homeowners in the city? Well,
start in the schools. Education is most definitely important. Let's start getting our even our younger grades, not even just our high schoolers. Showing them the value of money and, what you could do with money, besides blowing it, investing in it. So, it's starting with our youth, and our youth will go home and take this information to their parents. Many parents, in the city, a lot of them only have high school diplomas or GEDs. Many doesn't even have GEDs. So we most definitely have to start with our youth. Let's start raising them up now.
Mm-hmm. And that financial literacy, you don't need a degree for that. You don't need higher education. You just need to have the resources. You can start at any age, and you can and that will, that's something you're gonna keep with you your entire life.
Your entire life.
With your community work, you are, again, like I said, a block club leader. You sit on the board of Healing Hub, New York. Do I have that right? Can you tell us a little bit about Healing Hub?
The Healing Hub, we meet people where they're at. We know that there is a lot of people who have unaddressed trauma. They don't know how to handle it. They don't know how to deal with it. They don't know who to go to. They're afraid of being judged. And that's where we step in. The Healing Hub is a judge-free place. We look at you as you're one of us. Mm-hmm. So we just want to make sure we provide those resources, counseling, financial literacy, all that good stuff to residents who are in need.
Yeah, and it feels like from the people I've talked to, I talked to a survivor of the 514 shooting last week. There is still a whole lot of trauma going on, but there's also still a lot of anger as well. Does that anger persist? Do you see that? How does that, when you're trying to heal, helping to heal people? Is it a different pathway you take to healing someone from the trauma of the shooting, as opposed to someone who is just very angry with what happened? Is there two different ways to go about that?
There are two different ways. Like currently right now, the Healing Hub, we're working with a young lady Her daughter was, they were inside the Tops shooting when it happened. And right now, she's feel like she's forgotten about. So that's where we come in. We're stepping in. We're providing resources. Right now, she's homeless. We provided a hotel room for the young lady. So the aftermath, there's still a lot of people that's truly affected. We helping the ones that's angry as well, who just don't understand why this happened. Many people died just because of the color of their skin. There was no reason.
Right. And to follow up with you on that, you've got 5 kids, right?
Yes.
How old's the oldest and how old is the youngest?
My oldest is 18. My youngest is 4.
How do you talk to them about 514 and about racism?
In the beginning, it was so hard, but now that we had to literally live through it. My kids have to live through it. They're at an age where a lot of my children are on social media. They're seeing things that they shouldn't see, especially from May 14th. So it was really hard to get those the visions out of their head. So we try to just provide counseling to the kids. Talk with them more. Explain to them that every white person isn't bad. You can't walk around with hate in your heart. You still have to love people, regardless. Even now, the way that my family and I are healing, we're giving back to the community over in that area. And, just trying to understand the needs of the community and just trying to provide those needs to them.
Sounds like you've had more than a few long nights at the kitchen table talking with your kids about what's going on.
Yeah, we're in this together. Everything that I do, I like to include my family, especially my community work, because you just never know. It could be you one day. So, and I try to explain that to them all the time. You're blessed, and that's our job, to give back to others who are in need.
Speaking of which, along with the Healing Hub, you've got I guess it's affiliated with the Healing Hub, Healing Soul Saturday. Can you talk a little bit, Healing Soul Saturday, excuse me. Talk a little bit about that. I believe it's a food giveaway. Why is that so important? I
love Healing Soul Saturday. My first day doing it was May 14th. When there's giveaways downtown, and there's a giveaway on Main and Utica. And they said, Le'Candice, you live in Riverside. What do you think about doing one? And I was like, yes, because there's no grocery stores over there. A lot of residents in that area are, low income, refugees. They are in need. So when I was thinking of the name, we were thinking of different names, like, what can I call it? And I'm like, Healing Soul Saturday. So our first day was May 14th, and it was a beautiful day. It was a sunny day. We met so many people. We served so many people. It was just an amazing day. Soon when I get home, I get the call that the Tops massacre happened. And the first thing I did was I called all my family to make sure they were okay. And then I ran to Tops on Jefferson. I literally went from Healing Souls in Riverside, literally, to going over in Jefferson and trying to just heal the souls of so many families. So Healing Souls now is very personal to me, and May 14th is a day that I will never forget.
Yeah, that's incredible. Did that take a toll on you that day?
Oh, did it take a toll on me? I was out there all night long with families. One family I remember being with was the Macy family, the sister of Cat Macy. And when I got there, on Jefferson at that time, there were still bodies in the parking lot. So when I got that call, I instantly, I went to be a service, to the community. And, seeing her just irate and crossing the police line because she wanted to see if her sister was okay.
Yeah.
So a lot of those scenes, they still, they replay in my head, and it's a day that I will never forget, but a day that I will always honor. It's just as important as 9/11 to me.
Mm-hmm.
In our city, across the country, our victims, the Jefferson 10, they deserve the same respect.
You're listening to Buffalo What's Next here on WBFO News. I'm Thomas O'Neill White, and sitting in with me today is former mayoral candidate and community activist Le'Candice Durham. Now, you've been doing all this outreach to help others. How have you been able to, kind of heal yourself? Is that like an internal thing? Is that with family and friends? How is that working for you?
Good question. Really good question. I don't even know how to answer it. Most definitely an internal thing. I've been saying for a while, I was going to speak with someone. But sometimes it's hard to find someone who understands. And I know I'm not alone.
Not at all.
And that's the main thing of trying to find someone who understands and that I could relate to. But one way I have been healing, though, is just being there for other people. It makes me smile to see other people smile, and just knowing that, I was able to help. But I know I need some. Mm-hmm. I can admit I do.
Mm-hmm. Circling back to the point you made about there not being, grocery stores in your neighborhood of Riverside, is there a quick fix to tackling the problem of food deserts across the city? And is there a long-term fix, do you think?
I won't say there's a quick fix, but I would love to see maybe a start as maybe bringing in some more gardens, community gardens, let's start growing our own food, That's a long term. That's going to be there forever. Mm-hmm. So we most definitely have to think about the forever. I would love to see more grocery stores even consider, even come into Riverside. We had to save a lot. They closed down. Right now, all we have is like Dollar General, Family Dollar.
Yeah, and those aren't grocery stores.
Those not grocery stores at all.
They serve a public good, don't get me wrong, but they're not grocery stores. They're not Wegmans. They're not Tops. They're,
Right, most definitely not no Wegmans or Tops.
So you would think long-term community gardens, getting fresh foods that way. Healthy is the key. If we want to live a long life, we have to eat healthy. A lot of the foods now, we don't even know half of the time what we're even eating. They're injected with so many different hormones. Mm-hmm. And, it's a way to bring togetherness in the community as well. Knowing, you get to know your neighbors. And even in Riverside, once again, we have a lot of refugees in that area. And in their countries, that's what many of them did. They planted, they growed their own food. Mm-hmm. So they could teach us a thing or two. Absolutely. Absolutely. Can you talk about your work as a Block Club leader? I'd love to know more about that, please.
I love being a Block Club leader. Before we bought our house in Riverside, we lived on the east side of Buffalo. We lived on Persian, right around the corner from the Tops on Jefferson, between Dodge and Northampton. So, mm-hmm. That Tops, that whole, that was our area for years. But when we were renting, our landlord went up on our rent. And we were like, no, we cannot continue paying this if he's not doing repairs. So home ownership was like, we need to do this. We need to buy us a house. We could buy us a house, pay a mortgage the same amount as rent. So in the process of buying a house, I said to the guy, I said, Lord, you help us buy a house. I promise I'll do anything. Whatever you tell me to do, I'll do it. So we ended up buying a house in Riverside, and the Lord spoke to me. He said, remember you said you'd do anything? And that's when I started the Block Club. I felt that it was a need, and I felt the Lord speaking to me, telling me that I needed to even do more than just the Block Club. He wanted me to just take care of the entire area. So what started as a Block Club, just helping my street, turned out to helping the whole entire district over there. So that was just a promise and a commitment that I made to God was, you help me buy your house. I do whatever you need, and our Block Club is going strong. We had maybe about 3 national nights out since we lived over there. Community, during the COVID, we did PPE giveaways, fresh produce giveaways, a little pop-up shops in the neighborhoods, just trying to bring different resources over in that area.
Mm-hmm. And drug treatment is another issue you're tackling in your Riverside community.
Opioids is another thing in my neighborhood.
That's a problem?
That is a problem in the 14207 area code. So overdose prevention is truly important to me. I work with Buffalo Mobile Ops. They're like a Uber style, but they do like Narcan prevention on wheels. So I've been working with them very closely, educating our community, lace marijuana right now. These are the things that the residents are not thinking of. They're not, you think they're just smoking a little weed, and your marijuana is lace. So we're starting to see like an uptick of overdosing that as well. Lace, the cocaine is laced as well. Many think it's just a recreational drug, and but
you don't know what you're really putting in your body.
Most definitely. So education is the key. If you're gonna do any of those type of drugs, make sure you have Narcan and those type of things with you.
Was there pushback when it, coming with the, hey, keep Narcan on you, you don't, be safe? Was there pushback for the Narcan? Because I heard when cops started carrying Narcan, when this was like a national issue, like, well, just let those quote unquote junkies overdose, whatever. Was there any pushback like that when you started doing these overdose prevention things?
No, but I've seen it going, like you said, across the country. Those are people's loved ones. And a lot of those residents who are addicts, it was the small things, maybe like a breakup that led to someone even trying drugs and getting hooked on it, or just hanging out with the wrong crowd. So you can't even judge, because you don't even know what someone, went through.
Yeah.
But to get them out of that is very important to me. Last week I seen a mother and daughter addict together, using together. So one of my goals is to break those curses, continue educating the community. I see in the 14215, the University District, Rashid Wyatt, they're campaigning against methadone clinics in their neighborhood. There's about 5, and I understand that we need to bring those resources over to areas that are, a lot of people are against methadone clinics, but when you get out in a community, you see how real it is. And I'm seeing how real it is. We have to be able to provide those resources. Homelessness is big in Riverside. Residents are sleeping in Riverside Park, and they're sleeping in Riverside Park because many of them they're on drugs. They have nowhere to go. So this is what I mean. We have to meet them where they at. We got to go into Riverside Park and saying, hey, we're here. We're here to help you. What is it that you need? Provide those resources.
Well, Candace, thanks again.
Thank you.
This is Thomas O'Neill White. Stay with us for more Buffalo What's Next.
This is Buffalo What's Next, where we have conversations with the community about moving forward. To have your voice heard, press the Talk to Us button on the WBFO app, and we'll work to get your questions and comments on the air. Join us on Twitter at WBFO or email us at news@wbfo.org. Together, we'll have the conversations that are needed. This is WBFO, your NPR station.
And good morning. This is Dave Debo. In my news feed yesterday, an article popped up. It was from New York City, but the headline read, Mayor Adams, the mayor of New York City, signs bill aimed at lowering maternal mortality rate among black women. And so I was thinking, if something that was noticed at the largest city in the nation, chances are it's a universal problem. Chances are it's something worth talking about on this program. And so, this morning, LuAnne Brown is with us. She's president and CEO of the Buffalo Pre-Natal Perinatal Network. And if that's not something to make it interesting enough, Antoine Johnson is here. He's the program manager of their Buffalo Fatherhood Initiative. In fact, he's a new father himself. So with all that's going on in your house, I'm awfully glad you took the time to come on down. LuAnne, also, thanks for being here.
No problem.
Let me start with the premise, LuAnne.
Mm-hmm.
Maternal mortality rates are higher among black women in Greater Buffalo?
Nationally.
Okay.
4 to 5 times higher.
Really?
Than white women. Yes.
And it's a problem we also have here.
Yes.
To what extent?
Our numbers of our deliveries, obviously we can't compete with like a New York City, but I think ours in this area in New York State, our mortality rate went from 3.3 to 6.4%. So
the numbers I have, infant mortality per 1,000 live births in Erie County, 173 for whites, 208 for blacks. That's a massive difference.
Massive difference, right. And that has been the pattern for several years.
Why? Is it the same old thing we've talked about it before on this program, the whole social determinants of health?
Sure.
Is it access to health care? Is that part of it too?
It's all that. I think it's access to health care. I mean, I think that people have made attempts, and I think there's been improvements in that. There's clinics now that are located in the high-risk areas. Social determinants of health are huge, from food access, housing access, educational level of a lot of African-American women. They actually have done a lot of research on a thing called weathering, which they've basically shown that African-American women, regardless of their education sometimes, still have bad outcomes. And they think it's because this weathering, which is, they describe it as it's like the constant racism they face as a black woman. And they will find women that have moved here from Africa who have better outcomes because they haven't lived in the environment, the racist environment.
Generational stress.
Yep.
Yeah. I was just about to go there in terms of talking about the historical trauma, and you think about things like slavery and how African American families and particularly women were treated. I think all that stuff plays a part into some of the stuff that we see today.
I've even heard it called post-traumatic slavery syndrome.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yep. The idea that generational stress has an impact on the body, an impact on lifestyle. Yeah. In some cases, there's even been some research out there that shows it has an impact on your DNA.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That to me is nuts. I don't mean it. I'm not denying it, but I'm just kind of astounded by it.
Mm-hmm. Serena Williams is a perfect example. Here's a woman who had every advantage, was pregnant, certainly was educated, had resources, and ended up with a pulmonary embolus, which she recognized in herself, but was not really paid attention to. She was smart enough to advocate for herself.
And to what degree is that part of what you do? Do you teach people to advocate for themselves, or do you kind of just, and I don't mean this in a bad way, jump on in and advocate for them?
The two programs we have, Healthy Families New York, and our programs are all, both home-based. We do everything in the client homes. We're both basically on the east and west side of Buffalo. Healthy Families does go a little further out. We do South Buffalo, Cheektowaga, Lackawanna, a little bit of Hamburg, a little bit of Tonawanda. They are more likely, they want to, because they're with the family for 5 years until the child turns 5. So they want to teach the moms how to understand the system and how to navigate the system. My community health worker program is looking for more of the vulnerable women, like they find the women on outreach and bus stations that are homeless. We do a lot more hand-holding there. But both the programs model advocacy. A lot of times we go with them to appointments with their doctors. So they'll see us, and sometimes we're translating because we have a large Hispanic, and 37% of my staff speak Spanish. So they will see us advocating, and we try to teach them that. But we also have, through the Community Health Worker Pitch Grant, we've just started a consumer advisory board, which are graduates of our programs who wanted to give back. But one of the goals of that program is to teach them advocacy and let them influence their neighborhoods and their communities.
How do you find your subjects? Because I imagine the hospitals just can't say, hey, LuAnne, here's an at-risk person. That would violate HIPAA, obviously.
Yeah, we do get referrals from the hospitals. We actually have a pilot going right now with Oshai Children's where we're pretty much based at the prenatal clinics.
Wow, okay. I didn't think that would be allowed.
No, it basically, no, if we're like in the waiting room, we're not in the rooms, but we we talk to clients, and this program is voluntary. It's free. They don't have to become a participant, but we get them through the hospitals. We get them through agencies. Community health worker actually, like pre-COVID, now we're picking it up again. 70% of their referrals came through street outreach. So they go into neighborhoods, not in the dead of winter, but knocking on doors, handing cards out. So we get them from various sources, a lot of word of mouth. Some of our clients, they refer their sister, their cousin, their neighbor.
And in that regard, you're probably wandering neighborhoods, not necessarily giving out health information alone.
No, we give out a lot of other information.
Housing is part of it?
Housing is a big part. I'll start my rant now.
I knew it was a rant. That's why I mentioned it. Go ahead. Feel free to rant.
So housing is, again, a social determinant of health. It is not our primary mission at Buffalo Pre-Natal, but you can't talk to people about health education and health goals if they don't know where they're sleeping that night. Mm-hmm. Or they're sleeping in an unsafe place. So we have become very involved with housing. I think our homeless numbers tripled during COVID. So we have become involved to the point that we're helping them fill out the paperwork for Belmont housing. We're going to look at apartments. My clients, and I can't even describe some of it. I could probably send you lovely pictures of some of the apartments my clients are in, but you wouldn't put your dog in some of these homes.
You recently took some representatives of HUD and the Attorney General.
Yes, we did a little tour with them, and I'll tell you, there was complete silence when they walked through those homes because the one mom couldn't even have her kids at the house because it wasn't a safe environment. So my rant is that I'm very happy they have housing for vets and seniors, but we need to have housing for families. I mean, it's a basic human need that you have a safe place. And our clients, when we find them, they don't want to complain because they don't want to get evicted. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's better to have a roof over your head than no roof over your head. But, we work really closely with the Community Foundation on their lead task force because that's another huge issue in Buffalo. The lead housing, and our clients tend to be in these housing. We work very closely with, and that's been about a year with the city inspectors because they have to get in the homes in order to cite the landlords, but our clients are not going to open the doors to those cities because they don't know them. But if my community health workers with them, they will.
What kind of things do they see? You said earlier there was a home that was definitely unsafe for children. What makes it unsafe?
There wasn't enough egress to get out of the house. The furnace was right in the middle of the living room. A lot of times they take attics and just make them apartments. Mold, lead, rodents. It's just unsafe. It's unsafe for anybody, but especially a pregnant mom or a mom who's parenting young children.
And
go ahead.
If I could just jump in and add, I did housing work around affordable housing opportunities for about a year and a half with the local non-for-profit. And one of the things that I saw, in addition to some of the things that LuAnne pointed out, was the landlords who own these properties. And a lot of times when I would walk with my clients and through the apartments to, look at them as options, the landlords really didn't care a whole lot about the way in which the apartment was. And once clients got in, they didn't do a lot to try to address issues that were wrong with the apartments. And so, we found ourselves having to advocate for that because there are a lot of biases for low income and particularly families of color, whereas sometimes their needs are not met immediately, right? Because they're seen as less than. So I think that's another issue.
Tell me more about that particular part of the issue. Racial discrimination.
Yeah, exactly. And that's exactly what it is. I mean, when we think about the way in which apartments are kept and, just the communities and all these other things. I mean, I think that plays a big role in terms of why some of the things that LuAnne mentioned are not immediately addressed. I mean, some of the apartments that I saw, I wouldn't live in them, let alone advocate for a client to live in them, and so I think the discrimination and all those other things, play a role in the housing market and so forth.
And then this would be the perfect time to talk more about your fatherhood program, because I can imagine that personal difficulties, be it housing or health or a huge list, keep anyone from making fatherhood the kind of priority it needs to be in their lives to be successful.
Sure. I guess, in a segue from the last topic, I was thinking about the experience that my wife and I had when we had our second child, our son.
Which was in the past couple of days, right?
A couple of weeks ago. And so when my wife, she went into preterm labor, and it was scary for her and me at the time. And when we were in, I don't know what the room is called, but as they were prepping her, she kind of felt rushed and like some of the nurses or doctors are talking over her head. But there was one African-American nurse in there that was really kind of paying attention to her. Like, did you understand what they just asked you and those kind of things? And she really appreciated that her and I talked a little bit about it. But I was grateful that she did ask my wife questions to clarify things and help her to understand, because it was an overwhelming situation. Probably a lot more for her than me, but yeah, so you think about like doulas and, some of the things you talked about around maternal deaths and so forth. I think just the advocacy part, having nurses that care and can explain things to the patients is super important.
What of the difficulties that fathers specifically face, though? Is that something beyond some of the health stuff that LuAnne has already talked about?
Somewhat. Some of it is very similar. So one of the things that I learned over the last year or so is that 1 out of every 10 men will experience postpartum depression.
Seriously, I'd never heard that.
Which is not something that...
you think of it as a woman thing.
You think of it as a woman thing, not something that a lot of men will probably even admit if they do have it. And so that was really something for me to learn. But I think a lot of the things that, we talk about men in this space of infant and maternal health, they're kind of like the invisible parent or person. When we have these discussions, one of the things that I also learned was that 1 out of every 4 children will grow up in a home without their biological father in the United States, according to the U.S. Census Bureau. And when that happens, mothers are twice as more likely to experience infant mortality, right? Their rates go up, the dropout rates go up. women are 7 times, or teenage women are 7 times more likely to have teenage pregnancies, and the list goes on. And so I think just about everything that we're talking about intersects with men and fatherhood.
Is your goal then to help existing fathers stay with the family?
Absolutely, that's a part of it. Yeah.
Okay.
So well,
just a part, though. Tell me more.
Yeah. So our very first cohort, I'll never forget, we had the youngest person in the group was about 18. They weren't even a father yet. They were just playing like a father figure role to nephews. And the oldest was in like mid-60s. And so he was kind of starting all over again.
Wow.
And so we just looked at this intergenerational group and the different dynamics in terms of life stages and priorities and all sorts of things. And it was really interesting. And I mean, the needs vary too. So, I mean, this topic around fatherhood and, kind of understanding what's important is really vague.
What do you do? Take me through that kind of talk. Do you just pull fathers in individually? Just like LuAnne has people working individually on some of the health issues, do you pull people in individually and talk to them about whatever's going on in their life?
Sometimes. We do provide individual services, and we try to meet dads where they are on an individual level, but a lot of the work that we do is group-based.
Okay.
And so we do these cohort models seasonally, so fall, winter, and spring, and we take dads through a course known as Nurturing Fathers. And so it's traditionally a 13-week group where we talk about everything from what our relationships were like with our fathers, which is huge, because a lot of us didn't have fathers in our lives, which is why we see some of the rates we see when men are not involved in the lives of their children, because for a lot of men or fathers, it's hard to be what you never saw, right? And so we talk to them about that.
You can't model behavior that you don't know.
Exactly. And so one of the things with the Nurturing Fathers curriculum, which is evidence-based, is that it teaches men how to unlearn some of those negative behaviors, right? So if they grew up in abusive homes or whatever, right? It walks them through how to kind of unlearn some of that stuff, even though a lot of it is very traumatic. But then also how to learn new parenting practices that will aid them in their experiences as fathers. And so we talk about things related to co-parenting. What's the difference of fathering a boy versus a girl, and everything in between.
I'm trying to thread the needle here between stereotyping and putting the problem through a racial equity lens. What's the makeup of your group?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that. So because more often than not, when people think about fatherhood programs, they think about programming for black men who are not involved in the lives of their children, and that is not true. So one of the other things that I found interesting when I first started at Buffalo Pre-Natal was that the CDC did a study between 2006 and 2010. One of the things that they found out was that black men are actually more involved than some of the other races of ethnicities when it comes to direct care. So we're talking about things like bathing and feeding, taking their kids to school, and doing, just the day-to-day kind of things.
Yeah.
I would have never guessed that. Because of the narrative that is put out there. Right. So the makeup of our groups, to answer your question, it varies. So it's almost half and half in terms of African American and white fathers. And we have Asian and Hispanic and different fathers from time to time, but I would say both white and black fathers in the community are predominant.
I want to go back to that stat you had earlier, though, the 1 in 4. Is that specific to African American men?
No.
That's in general.
Men in general, yeah.
All right. And that's kind of the thing you have to target and deal with.
Absolutely.
All right. We'll talk more about that when we return. Antoine Johnson is here. He's the director of the Fatherhood program at the Buffalo Pre-Natal, Perinatal, did I get that right? Network. LuAnne Brown is their CEO. We'll talk more with both of them when we come back. This is Buffalo What's Next on WBFO.
When you meet with your trusted advisors to review your estate plan, please consider asking them to name Buffalo Toronto Public Media as a beneficiary in your will, trust, insurance policy, or retirement account. Your gift will ensure the voice of public radio continues for generations to come. For more information, visit WNED.org/legacy or contact Colleen Miller at cmiller@WNED.org. Thank you.
Watch the WNED PBS original production, The Adirondacks.
We've come closer here to a working balance between the natural world and the human world than just about any place on Earth.
The Adirondacks, now streaming on YouTube and the PBS video app.
This is Buffalo What's Next, where we have conversations with the community about moving forward. To have your voice heard, press the Talk to Us button on the WBFO app, and we'll work to get your questions and comments on the air. Join us on Twitter at WBFO or email us at news@wbfo.org. Together, we'll have the conversations that are needed. This is WBFO, your NPR station.
And this is Dave Debo. We are with Antoine Johnson today. He's the director of the Fatherhood Initiative at the Buffalo Pre-Natal Perinatal Network. And their CEO and president, LuAnne Brown, is also here. We're talking a little bit, as we have on past programs, about social determinants of health, but specifically what that means for maternal mortality in Western New York, specifically what that means for fatherhood involvement, the involvement of dads in Western New York. They address both of those. Before the break, Antoine, you were talking a little bit about the fact that there is definitely a racial misconception there.
Yes, absolutely.
How or why, when you have an uninvolved father, are they uninvolved?
That's a loaded question.
I didn't mean it to be. I'm just naturally curious.
No. It's a good question. So it can be for a variety of reasons. I think I mentioned earlier about the idea of how it's hard to be what you never saw, right? So if your father was absentee, then some of the ideas of why I can be absentee, and the mom can take care of all the responsibility. I was raised by a single parent, and so she can do it by herself too. I think the other thing is that for men who don't lack the confidence to be able to effectively care for their child,
right.
Maybe they don't feel like they make enough money, which can be huge for men because far too often we associate our value with how much income we earn and things of that nature. I think the list goes on, but those are the two biggest things that come to my mind.
And that's where some of the socioeconomic factors obviously come in.
Mm-hmm.
That's the overlap, I'm thinking, with what LuAnne is talking about in general, social determinants. So broadly speaking, and you addressed this earlier, you look at housing, you look at homelessness, access to care, is that part of it?
Yeah, I mean, that's like one of the first things we look at in both the programs to make sure healthy families, those clients are usually already connected to prenatal care, but a lot of times our community health worker program, they're not. So the first thing we do is we make sure they have health insurance and a health provider. And we're so insistent on it because we know if they're not going for their prenatal care, and there's a lot of things that can get in transportation, but, we make the appointment. A lot of times we take them to the appointment or we arrange transportation. We're with them all the time so we can have a really good handle on what they're doing. And we use that time to educate. But it's not like we can't get into places, but you have to encourage them and educate them about the importance of prenatal care.
And that's where doulas come in. That's a phrase that I don't know if everyone's familiar with.
Right. So doulas are, they're non-clinical, they're not nurses, they're not doctors.
This is not a midwife.
This is not a midwife. A doula is really, I would describe a doula as a support person. So they've been around forever. I actually had a program when I worked at Children's that we started, a doula project. So the role of the doula is prenatally, they will see the mom, do education, explain to them about what's going to happen during delivery. The doula role is so important because a lot of times, including our clients, they don't have family support sometimes. They may be estranged from their family. So they'll see them prenatally. Then they're their labor support. So they're with them during the labor. I mean, if they're there the entire time. I mean, the nurses are taking care of other clients. They're trying to do their job. The doctors are busy as well. But a doula is a kind of a consistent support person.
Is it safe to call them a pregnancy-specific social worker?
They can function. I mean, some of the things they might do is to help them connect to resources. They certainly could do that. But I think their role is really education, support. Then they will see them postpartum as well.
Okay.
So after they have the baby, they're in there helping them with the baby. So it's been, shown that the presence of a doula really can impact outcomes for the mom. It's just that fact of having somebody there who's got your back and is constantly, knows you, knows what your concerns are.
And New York City, again, a little bit of the impetus for this program. New York City, again, just yesterday passed some legislation targeting the idea of lowering maternal mortality rates among black women. One of the things in their legislation is more training, more access, more recruitment of doulas. Is that an issue we have here?
Yeah, we do have a doula collaborative because New York State several years ago did a pilot where they actually were going to pay the doulas. So Erie County was identified as one of the sites, and Kings County, which is in New York City. Kings County opted not to participate, and I, understandably, because the prices they were paying, you're living in New York City, you got to make a livable wage, so they did not do that. But in Erie County, we do have a large doula contingent. We certainly can have more. I've had some of my staff, I just send 2 people through doula training. And they function, some people, so they've been able to bill insurance companies for this service. Some doulas just charge a flat fee, that's whatever. But a lot of our clients can't afford it. So that's why this was a nice option for them. They did extend the pilot, and we're hoping it's going to be a permanent thing. It's been common across the United States. There are states that reimburse doulas. California just did it. They just passed the law in California. They're going to pay the doulas.
Does New York?
Just through this pilot.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that pilot is specific to your program here in Erie County? To
Erie County. So anybody, and there are community doulas, there's several organizations. Shannon Johns runs a doula program called Calming Nature, I believe. So there's probably a good group, and we convene that group. AHEC actually has been the convener of that group.
AHEC?
Associated Health Education Project.
Okay.
It was originally with United Way, and now we've transitioned to them. So they convene the group. They provide support resources to them.
You said something earlier in the program that I scribbled down immediately, and I'm only now getting the chance to circle back. During COVID, our homeless numbers tripled. When you say ours, do you mean county at large or the amount of homeless people you work at?
I'm talking about the number we dealt with.
Okay.
It just was, our staff worked remotely for a couple months, so they were doing virtual calls and FaceTime with their clients. But we pretty much went back into the homes until we had the spike stopped, came back. But we've been pretty much in the homes because I know that we are the only support for some of these clients. So we found one woman who had been living in her car with her 2-year-old for a year. It just seemed to exacerbate during that time. And that's why we became so involved with it. Just because, again, it's such a priority for people that you need a safe place to be, and when you're pregnant and when you're raising children.
Devil's advocate. Weren't there all those programs during COVID that kept people from being evicted? Why do you think the numbers went up as much as they did within your population that you serve?
I don't know if people were, some of them maybe because they weren't working. Even if they were getting unemployment, the rents also went up, which is a restriction for our clients. That continues to be a problem. I think it was a couple of those things, I would guess. I'm guessing.
Okay. LuAnne Brown is here. She's with the Perinatal Network of Buffalo. Let's talk terms. Prenatal, I think everyone knows that. That's before birth. Is perinatal after?
Perinatal is kind of the whole period during the delivery and postpartum.
All right. And Antoine Johnson is also here. He's the head of their fatherhood initiative. I think I would be doing a disservice to the premise of this program if I didn't try to put things through the rubric of May 14th. Antoine, you spoke earlier about racial discrimination and the role it plays. How have things changed since the top shooting?
For our program specifically?
Yeah, or in terms of what you're seeing in the community. If there was a specific way to answer that from what you're seeing in your program, great. but more broadly, also, what are you seeing?
Yeah, I'm seeing a lot of coming together where the community is concerned. A lot more programs stepping up in terms of addressing some of the issues related to May 14th. And there's a more connectedness. I just kind of feel, as tragic as that situation was, I think it brought a lot of people together as a result.
Groups that weren't working together, or just average people?
Not necessarily just groups. I mean, just average people, you know, it's a community.
Yeah.
And I imagine it brings forth a discussion that I mean, this radio program is just one small example, sure. More people are talking about race, aren't they?
Absolutely.
Because of it.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, it was, when it happened that day, of course, my first thought was my staff, because my staff are from the communities they serve.
Sure.
They shop at their tops. We checked on all of them, none of our clients, but all of my staff knew one or two of the victims. They all, because that's that community, their church community, whatever, they all knew somebody. So we really had to do, some healing with the staff. We actually have our EAP program through Child and Family Services, and we had just signed with them. So they came in and did like a debrief with the staff. It was very difficult because it was just so horrendous, and I think the whole race issue just came to the forefront, and people finally realized, that, the perception that some people have about, black people and, what their rights are and what their impact is, and it was a horrendous experience, and, my staff really needed to heal together. They did.
Antoine, I want to bring you into the discussion as the man of color in the room. How do we, the community in general, everybody, talk more productively about race relations?
Can you say more about more productively?
In ways that will spark change and understanding?
Honestly, I don't have a straight answer, but I think one of the things that comes to my mind is just keeping those topics in the forefront. I think far too often when things happen, it's like, the flavor of the month. We talk about it for a while because it was sad and tragic, and then we don't talk about it anymore. And then
CNN was here, now they're not.
Exactly.
ABC was here, now they're not.
Exactly.
Okay.
And not in a way where, people of color need to feel like they're, less than or pitied, but just in a way that says that we acknowledge the struggles that you have.
Is it your role as a person of color to educate white people like me and LuAnne?
I don't think it's my role to educate white people. I think that people of all walks of life should aspire to educate themselves on things that are important.
Okay. And I've heard others on this program say, most notably Jillian Hainsworth, the poet laureate, who's really active out in the community, that it really just comes down to more interaction. If there can be more reasons for someone like me from a suburb to eat a dinner on Jefferson Avenue, that kind of interaction, she says, could be, if you multiply it out, transformational.
Yeah, I mean, the city of Buffalo in general was very segregated. There's these different pockets. I mean, we have Williamsville and Amherst and Cheektowaga, and the city of Buffalo. It's very fragmented, and I think that relational piece of people who live in different parts of the city or neighborhoods coming to parts of Buffalo, like the east side of Buffalo, is really important. When we think about keeping these topics in the forefront and making change apart from when things happen that are tragic. And in fact, Jillian is actually going to be doing a special poem for our conference this year.
Okay, that's great. She's a lot of fun. A good discussion anytime we've had her on the program. We have about 3 minutes left here, and I wanted to just go between the two of you and find out one of my standard closing questions, but I really think it's most appropriate, is what does Buffalo need? LuAnne, if I reached in my pocket and gave you a magic wand, you wave it around, what happens? What does Buffalo need?
Well, you know what I'm going to say.
Because housing is your rant.
Housing is my rant. I want an apartment building for my clients that I can put them in You know, when I've got a domestic violence victim, that now we put them in a hotel for 5 days until we get them into a shelter. For a mom who's got a newborn baby that needs to be in a safe place with other women, which would be really supportive. It would be a really supportive environment. So that is my dream.
That's interesting. To me, that sounds a little bit like assisted living for seniors, but you're talking about something designed specifically for moms.
Absolutely. I think they draw strength from each other. I think all these developers that are putting up these like lovely apartment buildings, we need one for families.
Does this exist anywhere? Is it in the mind of LuAnne Brown, or are there places that we can look at and maybe steal the idea from?
There are places that do it. Gerard Place does a program for I think the substance abusing women. But there's definitely a need. I mean, I could fill that apartment building in 2 weeks.
How big would it have to be?
Let's see. I'd like it like 20 to 30 apartments.
Okay. All right. So there are developers out there. LuAnne Brown, bppn.org. No,
that's right.
At the end, we'll put out ways to get in touch and get more information. Same question for you, Antoine. Here's the magic wand. What does it do? What does Buffalo need?
That is a good question. I wish I had some time to really give it some thought. But I think just caring for our neighbors, you know, as cliche as that sounds, I think, you know, if we can all just be a little bit more thoughtful, that it will go a long way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. Is there, I want to probe that just a little bit more. Is there education that can be done to make that happen? Intention is good, and I might have good intention, and you might have good intention. But if at our core there are issues here that we're not addressing, how do you get over the hurdle? I guess is what I'm asking.
Yeah, I don't know if I would say education.
Okay.
I think, you know, I believe so much in the power of relationships, and like you talked about earlier, just coming down and having a cup of coffee on the east side of Buffalo.
Yeah.
I mean, that doesn't take a whole. You don't need a seminar for that. And so I think just the relationships and coming together.
All right. If people need to get in touch with either the Fatherhood Initiative or Buffalo Prenatal Perinatal Network in general.
Right. So the number, you can call 884-6711 is the number.
All right. Let's say it again if people have to write it down.
884-6711.
Okay.
And then our website is bppn.org. You can get information. You can refer clients that way. You can donate to us. You can find out all about all the great things we're doing. Do you want to add anything? Antoine,
No.
you can get a hold of Antoine that way, too.
All right. Both of you are through there.
Follow us on social media.
Okay.
Facebook, Twitter, Instagram.
At BPPN.
LinkedIn.
Yeah. Buffalo,
okay.
yeah.
I'm finding more and more LinkedIn is a lot more valuable than I thought it was.
LinkedIn, yeah.
All right. Guys, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you.
I appreciate it. Especially, Antoine, thanks to you for coming in the weeks after the birth of a child, when you're on leave and decide to come in and talk to us anyway. We appreciate it.
No problem.
This is Buffalo What's Next on WBFO and WBFO HD1 Buffalo, WOLN Olean, and WUBJ Jamestown. I'm Dave Debo. We'll be back with another program tomorrow. Thanks so much for being here today.